I now look to Ray McGovern to close the case for the proposition.
I bring with me the Constitution of the United States. The only oath I have ever taken was to protect and defend this Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Benjamin Franklin, after the Constitutional Convention, was asked, "What have you built us?" And he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." That's the question. Can we keep a republic under the existing, and I would suggest broken, two-party system? I think Senator Pressler here is a recent Exhibit A of what happens when an independently minded, very popular, way ahead in the polls 1 month before the election 2 years ago, all of a sudden has a flood, millions and millions of dollars into the campaign, discrediting, I don't know what they called you, but now, where'd that money come from? The Republicans?
Both sides.
Both sides. Oh, isn't that interesting? Both sides. Whoa. I leave you to draw the implications from that.
Point of information.
Thanks just the same. Now, I would like to suggest that there are, well, let me say this, that I mentioned Senator Pressler. I want to also mention a friend of mine, Congressman McDermott, for whom I have great respect and whom I knew before I knew Senator Pressler. Congressman McDermott was one of those very unusual Congress people who wanted to know how experts felt about the issues. Iraq, Iran, Syria. And we used to have little seminars. He's about to leave, so this is no secret. And he used to listen avidly together with 12 or 15 of his colleagues, some of them not even Democrats, and we would come to sensible conclusions. And I remember one time saying, well, okay, why don't we push that? And one of his actually very liberal colleagues said, McGovern, what planet do you come from? And I said, excuse me? He says, we're in the opposition. We can't do anything. I felt like saying, well, maybe I just go home, huh? What's the point? Now, this was a very honorable person who's done a lot of good things. He's no longer in the Congress, but I said to myself, wow, if you're in the opposition, you can't do anything? Well, that's the way it was then. Now, Congressman McDermott was one of those few who, before the Iraq War, saw that the president was not telling the truth and said so. Said so to George Stephanopoulos, and said so in Baghdad. And he was welcomed home with great applause, right? No. He was vilified in the mainstream media, and they got back at him in other ways as well. So what I'd like to do is suggest that the mainstream media has an awful lot to do with all of this, an awful lot to do. And it is as much what the mainstream media conceals as it promotes. Now, let me give you my archetypical example. We're talking about presidential elections. 12 years ago, when George W. Bush was running for a second term, and most of us thought that he really should be removed and not reelected, a very enterprising investigative reporter named James Risen found out that Bush and Cheney had played fast and loose with our Fourth Amendment even before 9/11. In other words, the Fourth Amendment says, the right of the people to be secure from unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue except upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation and clearly defining the places to be searched and the people or things to be seized. What could be simpler? Some of you will know that came out of our rather rather difficult experience with British who were ruling our country at the time. That's what they were doing, and that's why we put that in the Fourth Amendment. Now, what happened? Well, this was the summer before the election, and the powers that were in the newspaper that he worked for said, look, we know what's best for the country. If we let the American people know how Bush and Cheney have violated the Fourth Amendment, that's probably not best for the country, and so they suppressed it. They suppressed it for 15 months until December of the following year, when James Rison's book was in galley, and they were forced, lest they be embarrassed by the fact that the book came out before an article in the New York Times, so they published against the White House admonition. So that is the archetypical example of how the media can affect elections and can turn us one against the other, only that we learn later what really happened. The other thing I would suggest from recent experience is the bullhorn effect. Now, why is it that Donald Trump, a couple of months ago, it was revealed that he received 23 times as much media coverage in the evening news as Bernie Sanders? 23 times as much. Indeed, he received as much media coverage as all the Democratic candidates put together. Now, why would that be? Wow. Well, the head of CBS told us. You know what he said? He said, the super PAC deal, the super PAC is where candidates can get almost unlimited amount of money, right? He said, that's really bad for America, really bad for Americans, but it's really good for CBS. The circus really plays. He said just earlier this year, go Donald, let them spend all their money on us. CBS riding high, profiting from giving Donald Trump 23% of the attention compared with Bernie Sanders. Now, on the Democratic side, what do we have? Well, we have a very curious situation where the mainstream media is completely behind Hillary Clinton. Now, that may be because of the lesser evil function here, but what's happened with these emails? Well, many of you probably don't realize, but when the emails came out, Julian Assange had put them all together in a searchable form. He didn't fiddle with any of them. He brags about being pristine, pure, and handling these things so they can be used in the court of law, okay? And what did they say? 2 days before the Democratic National Committee convention, 2 days, what did they say? They said that Hillary Clinton stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders. Have any of you read those emails? Raise your hands. Whoa! One. Okay. Anybody down? Oh, good. Some others. Okay. Well, what did the Clinton campaign say? What are we going to do here? I know. Let's blame it on Russia. But this was Julian. Oh, that's okay. We'll say he was working for the Russians. That's a twofer. We get Julian Assange, we get the Russians. Yeah, but what's the rationale? We'll say that Putin wants Trump to win. Now, I know a little bit about Russian leaders. I've watched them for over a half century now, okay? The notion that Vladimir Putin would like to have someone who brags about being unpredictable, who takes violent offense at real or imagined slights, that Putin would like to have that person with his finger on the nuclear button or on the codes. No way is that. So the whole premise falls apart. You'd never know it. You'd never know it in the mainstream media because they all bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And it fell to Vladimir Putin himself at a public interview. He said, look, number one, we didn't do it, okay? But number two, who cares who did it? Did you read the stuff? Did you read it? So that's really a curious set of circumstances that I've not seen obtain in recent history. The major media coming out so strongly. Now we have the specter of the President of the United States coming out yesterday explicitly for Hillary Clinton in a very bizarre way. The presidents usually are not supposed to interfere with FBI investigations. Our president has bragged about not being willing to do that. Oh, but this time he did. Yeah. And what did he say? Well, it's not the Russians anymore, because the Russians can't be traced to the recent leaks. Who is it? Who's the bête noire? Who's the evil one? The head of the FBI. Why? Because a couple of weeks before the election, he decided to say, look, we got new emails that may show that Hillary, we have to look at them. I need to tell you that. Now, normally, and this is an important point because it speaks to what happens in the body politic today. Normally, the FBI and the Justice Department would suppress that information, okay, at least until the election is over. So the question is, why did the director of the FBI, Comey, decide that he had to come out and say, look, we got this stuff and I have to look at it. I don't know what it's in. Why did he do that? Anybody know? Well, you know about leaks, folks? I'm going to tell you a new expression, PP leaks. It's not what you're thinking. It's preemptive potential leaks. Whoa. What was he afraid of? Well, he's afraid of these people that work for him who still have a conscience, who still think that integrity should be respected in government service. And I'm sure that he was deathly afraid that if he sat on this and suppressed it, that his name would be mud, not only in Washington, but everywhere, if it came out that he didn't even look into these things. So leaks, I'm all for leaks. Leaks are really good. They not only work when they expose facts. You know, one thing the New York Times said there was a big article about why is it that WikiLeaks, the things it reveals, are so close to what the Russians say. Whoa! Innuendo there, huh? Well, you know the reason? Because it's factual, because it's documentary, because it shows what leading statesmen are saying to one another, and usually, to everyone's surprise, this turns out to support what the Russians have been saying. So, in an innuendo kind of way, the New York Times is saying what appears to be the truth, and that's the truth is that when Julian Assange releases these things, or other people leak to Julian Assange, they're doing a public service. I will finish here simply by saying that if any of you end up in the Foreign Office and you see people deliberately manufacturing intelligence to start a war of aggression, I hope to hell you'll leak. I hope you'll leak to some responsible media that is not part of the system, so that we can know what's going on, because it's the only way we're going to be able to know what's going on, given the state of what is called the mainstream media. So, go Donald, go Hillary, cry the beloved country, gone the republic.